On this episode of What the Ship, we look at the top 5 maritime stories from across the world. I'm your host, Sal Mercogliano. Welcome to today's episode. So, feeling much better. May not look better, but I feel much better, which is key. One of the reasons why you haven't seen a lot of episodes from me recently. Anyway, we're going to look at the top 5 stories across the globe on the world's oceans and inland waters. Discuss what is going on and what does it mean to you, the shipper, the carrier, the consumer. Why is this important to you? If you're new to the channel, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell to be alerted about new videos as they come out. All right, let's go ahead and jump into our first story. Our first story deals with a topic that I am going to be doing a separate video on. That is the release of the United Nations Review of Maritime Transport. But one of the things they talked about in this year's Review of Transport is the vulnerabilities of maritime choke points and how they threaten the global economy. I thought this was a great topic, and it's one I want to go into more detail with later on. However, what I want to do is take a look at the stories over the past week that really highlight this, issues we're dealing with maritime choke points around the world. So we first head over to the Black Sea. A story from Mike Schuller over at G-Captain. Maritime industry on edge as Russia intensifies attacks on Ukraine's Black Sea grain corridor. This alarm is being raised by the United Kingdom's Prime Minister Keir Starmer over the escalating attacks, and he warns that Russia's aggression is accelerating instability on a global scale. Specifically, he says this: Russia's indiscriminate strikes on Black Sea ports show that Putin is willing to gamble with global food security in the pursuit of war. Goes on, this is a barbaric war with consequences that stretch far beyond Europe. Next story, after 5 months of calm, Somali pirates may be back on the hunt. You may remember we saw the resurrection of Somali pirates that coincided with the Houthi attacks on shipping in the Red Sea. Now, after 5 months of calm, they're back. This video, or this image here, shows you the motor vessel Ruan, which the Indian Navy was able to recapture. We are once again seeing attacks out of Somalia. The European Naval Force's Operation Atalanta has reported a suspected pirate action group departing from Somalia's northern central coast. The last pirate activity was on June 7th and involved a suspicious approach on a Marshall Islands flag vessel, the Pacific Honor. However, European Naval Force's Maritime Security Center has issued an alert warning about 13 armed pirates operating out of the region. This again highlights suspected issues around the area. Coincidentally, we're seeing further attacks by the Houthi out of Yemen. This story from Mike Schuller. Merchant vessel targeted in multiple attacks in the Bab el-Mandab Strait. The report here out of the UK Maritime Trade Operations has it taking place about 25 nautical miles south of Al-Malkua when the vessel master reported an explosion in close proximity. Second explosion was reported by the vessel just 28 minutes later. Martin Kelly identified the vessel as the Liberian flag bulk carrier Matero. We then see this story from Reuters: Britain's Pacific pivot, Starmer's bold plan to counter China's maritime move. The UK plans to set up naval activity in the Pacific, including more joint fishing patrols, as Prime Minister Keir Starmer seeks to show support for US-led efforts to check China's expanding maritime reach. Posted a story on Twitter this week about that and got a lot of jokes about the UK's ability to really counter China militarily on the high seas in the Pacific. Granted, the UK is not quite the Royal Navy of old. However, I think it is an interesting statement from the United Kingdom to want to support the United States and other nations to show opposition. Again, you have joint operations going on in the Pacific right now. You have an Italian carrier battle group centered on the Italian aircraft carrier Cavour out there in the Western Pacific. Just did joint operations with the U.S. Navy, the Lincoln battle group. It is coming back. We have a Canadian frigate out in the area along with the New Zealand support vessel. So there is a lot of forces out in the area, and I think the British announcing this is not far off the beaten path. Add to this, at the same time, Biden-Harris to scale back missile defense of Guam. The proposed multi-billion-dollar program is cutting the number of sites down from 22 to 16. They'll still provide a 360-degree protection. They're using a kind of a mesh of weapon systems, Raytheon SM-6s, those are standard missiles, SM-3 Block 2As, THAAD, and Patriot batteries. The United Kingdom will be cracking down on dubious oil tankers in the English Channel. A lot of questions about the tankers sailing through the region. The United Kingdom will be inspecting vessels sailing through. This does raise some issues, however, about inspecting vessels in international waters as they sail through. The Danes have been talking about doing this in the Danish Channel, coming out of the Baltic into the North Sea. A lot of questions about whether or not they'll be able to do that. However, this is a next evolution on it. And then the last story in this block, fed up, the world's largest ship registry is giving sanctioned vessels the boot. The Panama Maritime Authority is taking a decisive move to safeguard the integrity of the world's largest ship registry, including strict legal measures aimed at vessels appearing on international sanctions lists. Well, Panama has been getting a lot of flack because a lot of the dark fleet, vessels hauling Russian oil, have been showing up in the Panama registry. It's the largest single group is in the Panama registry. And so Panama is cleaning it up. Panama has a long history of issues with its registry. They're long on accident reports. It takes them a while to do things. So this is a big thing. Plus, the current head of the International Maritime Organization is from the Panama Maritime Authority. So probably a good thing that they're doing this finally. All right, let's go ahead and jump over to our second story. Story number 2 will deal with the tanker market, including Russian sanctioned oil and Russian LNG. Now, I keep saying that one of the things that what's going on with shipping is doing is breaking into the mainstream. We are bringing shipping to the mainstream media and, more importantly, to you, the consumer of this. However, I was delighted, and I mean delighted, to be sitting at home after watching some football, turn on 60 Minutes, and who do I see on 60 Minutes but friend of the show, Samir Madani from Tanker Trackers. That's right, 60 Minutes was covering a major story. Now, 60 Minutes has done this in the past. They've done stories on the U.S. Navy. They did a whole feature on the Red Sea, which I actually helped contribute to, but I did not get a starring role the way Samir did. So this story over at GCAP by Mike Schuller, 60 Minutes Dark Fleet Special, how sanction-busting oil trade keeps the Kremlin afloat. The story goes on here in a twist that has left Western policymakers scratching their head. Russian economy has defied expectation and sanctions alike, growing at a rate that outpaces both the United States and Europe. Dileep Singh, the mastermind behind the U.S. sanctions strategy, confidently predicted that this financial onslaught would plunge Russia's economy into a freefall. Not going to lie, the best part of that interview yesterday was Singh coming on and admitting that he was kind of wrong on what happened. Now, he did kind of caveat himself, sitting there and saying that, the Russian economy is in a lot of shambles. However, it didn't quite take the free fall he thought. The story goes on, the key to Russia's economic survival lies in the ability to continue exporting its most valuable asset. Enter Samir Madani, co-founder of TankerTrackers.com, a Stockholm-based firm that has become instrumental in unraveling the mystery of Russia's economic resilience. But Donnie's company, which typically serves clients in the shipping and insurance industries, has uncovered a clandestine network of vessels dubbed the Dark Fleet. Here's Samir on 60 Minutes last night. The full article and interview is here. You can watch the whole thing. I really recommend it. Samir did great. They had him in a helicopter over the anchorage in Greece, watching a actual ship-to-ship transfer about to take place, tracking vessels. Samir is bar none the best at what he does. And Tanker Trackers is a great follow. If you don't follow him on Twitter, you should. If you want to go to their site, go see him. When I have questions, Samir is who I go to on this. However, we have more stories that go even deeper into this. This story at GCAP, Mike Schuller, inside the shadowy insurance market covering Russia's oil tankers. One of the key things to remember is what we're seeing here is the creation of this new, not really a dark fleet, I would say, but a parallel fleet. A new fleet that is operating kind of alongside the traditional commercial fleet. One of the things I thought they didn't cover quite enough in the piece in 60 Minutes, and you have to budget time, I understand that, is that what the sanction mechanism uses insurance, particularly the main insurance companies, the P&I, Protection and Indemnity clubs, that are the basis for most shipping, 12 big P&I clubs. And so the G7, along with the US and other countries, and the EU, use the P&I clubs to get basically companies not to haul Russian oil over a set price cap. However, what the Russians have done is found new insurance or created new insurance. So you see stories like this. Price Cap Coalition cracks down on sanction busting. However, new advisory takes aim at the Russian shadow fleet. So there's efforts to kind of bring those ships to bear. However, the freight costs for Russian oil are soaring. What we're seeing is rising winter costs mean more for Moscow's revenue. So freight rates for tankers exporting oil from Russian ports has risen this month ahead of winter, set to climb even further. Goes on here, freight rates from the Baltic ports to Western India have risen and may reach up to 5.5 million this month, compared to 4.3 million in the summer. In early 2024, the cost of a one-way voyage from the Russian Baltic ports to India was $7.7 million. Goes on, last week, Britain imposed new sanctions on 18 Russian oil tankers and 4 gas tankers. The vessels will not be able to call at UK ports or use maritime services provided by British companies. This brings the total number of Russian oil tankers targeted by the UK restrictions to 43. However, what they do is they just bypass the UK, and they will just use other methods to get them there, and that's one of the problems we're seeing with this. Story from Barry Parker, is the tanker market set for a comeback? Experts say a November surge could be just the beginning. This is out of the Capital Links Maritime Forum in New York. It drew a large crowd of people, and one of the things they were talking about was very optimistic here in what the tanker market will look like. This comes at the same time the U.S. will tighten screws on Russian LNG flows. The problem you have is that the West wants Russian oil and Russian LNG to flow, but they don't want Russia to profit from it. And it's hard to get the best of both worlds here. You're just not going to get it. And the Russians are figuring ways to get around the system. If you watch the 60-minute piece with Samir, one of the things they talk about later on is that the economy in Russia is booming. It's doing better than it was before. And that's because the Russians have figured this out. The danger you're doing is creating these parallel, shipping lines, but you're also starting to create parallel economies out there. And that's what happened during the Cold War. There were separate, economies. It didn't matter. One of the things that makes the world so much different today is that economies are integrated. And so if one thing happens in one area, it impacts others. That is not happening if they continue this. All right, let's go ahead and jump to our third story. Story number 3, let's do some updates. A lot of stories out there that we cover in the past that we need to update every now and then, and I have a bank of them right here. Number 1, you may remember that little thing called the port strike on the East and Gulf Coast. Well, the ILA, the International Longshoremen's Association, and the U.S. Maritime Lines is set to resume negotiations that could make or break U.S. supply chains in 2025. Now, my buddy, the CEO at Flexport, Ryan Peterson, came out on Twitter and said that he believed there was a 60% chance that a strike would happen in January 15th and then upped it to 80%. I disagree. I think I'm on the flip side of that. I think there's an 80% chance this strike is not going to happen at all. I am hearing that they're going back to negotiation. I heard it before this story happened. They're meeting together. They're hammering out a deal. I think this is going to get done. I think one of the issues they're waiting for is the election to be done before they come out. So I think we can expect to see a deal here, hopefully fairly soon. However, one of the places that is going to strike is the Port of Montreal. The Port of Montreal faces a 24-hour strike. Economic ripple effects expected across Canada. This is the Canadian Longshoremen's Union, Local 375, announced a 24-hour strike at the Port of Montreal, the largest labor action in ongoing labor dispute with their employers, the Maritime Employers Association. They've been working without a collective bargain since the new year. This follows on a 3-day strike at 2 terminals back in September. The root of the conflict stems from the expiration of the collective agreement. Key issues include scheduled management and work-life balance. Next story deals with the motor vessel Ruby. This is the vessel that had 20,000 tons of ammonium nitrate. It damaged itself leaving port in Russia, sought a protected anchorage in Norway, was kicked out of Norway, arrived off the Danish Straits to head into the Baltic, was denied entrance into the Baltic, anchored off of Great Britain, and sat there for several weeks looking for a port of refuge to do repairs. The problem is with 20,000 tons of ammonium nitrate on board, you're not going anywhere. They have finally worked out an agreement to bring the ship into Great Yarmouth and transload the cargo to another vessel. Understand, this is not an issue of really nationalities. This shipping company and the owners of the cargo have to work this out. I understand the danger of 20,000 tons of ammonium nitrate, but I did show in the video I did on Ruby that even if that vessel popped 20,000 tons of ammonium nitrate at the anchorage it was at, it wouldn't impact anything unless you were within a kilometer or two of the vessel. The vessel was far enough off the coast, it wasn't going to affect anybody. However, you don't want to minimize the risk. And the problem you have is that this is a shipping company, this is the owner of the cargo, they have to make the arrangements. You really can't do it. And as the vessel sat there, it created more and more problems, so much so that no one was willing to take the vessel on. Sooner or later, somebody had to. And it's good that the British have worked this out. Understand, we deal with hazardous cargo all the time on shipping. And if you think Ruby is a dangerous ship out there, you don't know what's floating out there. There's a lot more dangerous ships than Ruby out there. But what becomes dangerous is when you leave a ship and abandon it and you avoid it, that's when it starts becoming dangerous. So I'm glad they're finally starting to work this out. Other story, we head to the Panama Canal. Remember that drought that the Panama Canal experienced where we saw a 2/3 drop, or excuse me, a 1/3 drop in the number of ships coming through the canal? Only 2/3 the number of ships were allowed through. We reduced the size of the Neo-Panamax vessels through. Well, even with the reduction in ships, the Panama Canal netted a profit of $3.45 billion over the last year, meaning that the Panama Canal, which is raised tolls, is looking to get more money. Because remember, they're bringing maybe fewer ships through, but the ships they were bringing were larger ships because of that Neo-Panamax lane. They are making more money. They have recently raised tolls going through the canal. This is generating a lot more money for them. One of the things we're seeing now is more scheduled runs going through the canal. For example, we just saw an LNG tanker come through the canal. You don't usually see LNG tankers because they don't run on a set schedule like container ships or passenger liners, but there's an effort to get more of these vessels out into the canal, and so they're really diversifying what they have. Last update we have is motor vessel Dali. Dali right now is in the Sunda Straits, coming between Palembang and Java in Indonesia. The ship is about to enter the South China Sea, heading up to China to get repairs. Really interested to see what those repairs look like. I think the bow is going to be replaced on the vessel. However, the update we have is a judge approves shipping company's $102 million settlement over the Baltimore Bridge disaster. The payment approved by U.S. District Judge James Brader resolves the U.S. government's claim after the Justice Department filed a civil claim in September seeking $103 million from two Singaporean companies, Grace Ocean Private Limited and Synergy Marine Private Limited. Spokesperson for the company said on Friday they've agreed to pay even though they deny liability. Going on here, the state of Maryland, which estimates it will cost $1.7 billion to $1.9 billion to rebuild the bridge and anticipates completion by fall 2028, separately filed claims against the companies for the cost of the bridge, cleanup efforts, environmental claims, and other costs. Let me be clear. You've got different suits and different means of getting money from this vessel. The ship has insurance itself. However, through the P&I Club, the Protection Indemnity Club, there is insurance on the vessel up to about $3.1 billion. And this is going to be a long, laborious lawsuit, like every lawsuit is in shipping. The reason the company agreed for this is that this company does business with the U.S. government. They did not want this hanging over them for fear that, number one, they wouldn't be able to do business in the United States. Second, the vessels would be arrested and they would not be able to do that. So this is going to be an ongoing issue to do the claims. Remember, you don't just have the claims for the bridge. You've got 6 deaths. You have cargo that was delayed, 2 months of cargo in and out of the port of Baltimore. You have a plethora of delays that are going to be done and levied against this. So this is going to be a long, laborious lawsuit. We're still dealing with Ever Given back in 2021. It's 3 years later. Still have not resolved that. So all of that will need to be done. All right, let's go ahead and jump to our fourth story. Story number 4 takes us to the Inland Waterways of the United States, and a story that you have heard me said 3 times before over the course of the 3-year history of this show. The Mississippi River is drying up again, and the timing couldn't be worse. We seem to have this every fall, right when we need the Mississippi River to be at its highest levels to be able to flow cargo down. The Mississippi River is suffering from low waters for the 3rd straight autumn. While this isn't as bad as it has been in the past, we are seeing issues. Canal analyst Susan Stroud said this: longer periods of low water increase transportation costs to get bushels to port in the U.S., ultimately starve off business. Shipping costs are currently about 55% above the average for the past 5 years. For now, because world buyers in countries like China are rushing to import U.S. crops ahead of the November 5th presidential election, shippers are able to pass along the extra costs. U.S. corn at the Gulf of Mexico is priced at about $197 per metric ton, just below the prices in the Brazilian port of Santos. Bryce Baker, general manager of the Jersey County Grain Terminal in Hardin, Illinois, said, "We are at the mercy of the river. So-called draft restrictions, which limit how deep a vessel can sit in the water, mean a barge of corn could have 27% less than the full load. It definitely affects the volume. It's really making facilities like mine get longer barge freight rates." This is something we deal with all the time, and it comes coincidentally with a series of videos here that came out just this past week on the inland waters. Story over at GCAP by Alex Bering, how U.S. inland waters quietly keep the economy afloat. Wendover's production latest video, How Inland Waterways Work. The spotlight is on the often overlooked yet vital network of U.S. inland waterways that power much of the economy. From the vast Mississippi River to the intricate canal systems, the video dives into how the efficient, cost-effective mode of transport powers the U.S. economy, showcasing both the historical significance and modern-day challenges of maintaining this essential infrastructure. I would love to do a, Better Call Sal, break down that video, because let me be clear, Wendover does really great videos. I really like them. They did this video, they did one on Hawaiian transport not too long ago, and I overwhelmingly found most of what they say in there really accurate. I don't have a problem with it. This one in particularly, the Inland Waterways, is particularly good. But I had somebody on Twitter sit there and say, okay, why then do we not use the Inland Waterways more? And I will give you the reason I gave him. I had 5 reasons I gave him, and I apologize. I got them right here so I don't forget them. Number one is weather, droughts and floods. When you are dependent on the waterways, you are really at the mercy of weather. So you always have that. Second, it's slow. It doesn't move very. It's a barge. It's a barge and tug. And above St. Louis, you're going through locks and dams. So it is not fast. It's not like driving down a highway. Third is it's geared toward bulk products, grain, ore, oil. It's really not designed for like containerized cargo because you don't have the ability to move very quick. And so bulk products, largely large volume, low cost products. That's what makes this work, because you can use the design of the hopper barge to really do it. The fourth reason you don't do it, you have to double touch the cargo. What do I mean by double touch the cargo? You have got to put cargo into a truck, get it to a port. You've got to put it in a port. You've got to load it on the barge. You've got to take the barge down, offload it from the barge, and then put it on a truck again. So you have to double touch it. You have to touch it going into the barge and coming out of the barge. That adds cost. And whenever, as many times as you touch the cargo, you add cost to it. And the fifth and final thing is it's hard to compete against trucks that are charging $2 a mile. When you have $2 a mile, it's so much cheaper and it's so much more efficient and so much quicker. Until you incentivize away from the truck, you're going to haul things by truck. And that's just the way it is. And then if you don't haul it by truck, you're going to haul it by rail. And then if you don't haul it by rail, you'll haul it by the inland waters. Yes, the U.S. inland waters are amazing. We need to spend more money on it. John Conrad just did a piece on it in G-Captain where he talked about the fact that we need to invest more in inland waters. He loves talking about short sea shipping. Very hard to say, so short sea shipping. He loves that. And my problem with it is I love short sea shipping, but you're not going to get short sea shipping until you incentivize going on the short sea. As long as those trucks are out there and they're cheap and they're efficient and they're out there in large numbers, they're going to go on trucks. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at our last story. All right, last story is usually a lot of gloom and doom here on what the ship. We talk about gloom and doom all the time, but this time we're going to talk about something a little bit cheery. That's right, we're going to talk about the happiness factor of mariners at sea. Story by Mike Schuller, Longer Voyages, Happier Crews, the unexpected benefit of Red Sea diversions. Longer voyages around the Cape of Good Hope have provided unexpected benefits. The Mission to Seafarer's latest Seafarer Happiness Index report reveals a modest increase in seafarer satisfaction from 7.16 out of 10 up to 6.99. The quarterly survey provides vital insights into the sentiments and experiences of seafarers. A key factor contributing to the rise of happiness has been the unexpected benefits of longer transit routes due to Red Sea tensions. While the risk faced by seafarers in high-risk waters remain a grave concern, vessels diverting to alternative routes have experienced increased downtime, allowing for better rest, more social activities, improved onboard routines. I should also mention what makes them happier is they're not getting friggin' shot at by the Houthi. If you're not getting shot at, guaranteed you're going to be happier. So I don't really find a huge fascination in this one. I'm not surprised by it. However, I'll go on and continue here. While it's encouraging to see another slight rise in seafarer happiness, the report clearly shows that significant challenges remain. I agree. Ben Bailey, the director of the program. Seafarers are the backbone of global trade, and we must prioritize their well-being by addressing concerns around communication, shore leave, and compensation. Longer sea time fosters greater camaraderie. Senior officers are being more supportive, better food, better training. However, significant challenges persist, including poor internet connectivity, limited shore leave, and wage concerns. I will also mention that while seafarer happiness has increased, important to remember, ships are sailing longer distances. That means pollution is increasing. That means greenhouse gas emissions are increasing. It means costs are increasing. And I am all for seafarer happiness, but understand, you can be happy sailing through the Red Sea if the Houthi aren't friggin' shooting at you. And more importantly, you're going from point to point a lot faster than being at sea. I gotta say, I've done long sea voyages. I understand that it's, it's nice, it's therapeutic, and you're sailing long distances. You're also sailing around the Cape of Good Hope in wintertime. That's not exactly the best area to be in. We've seen numerous cases of containers falling off ships, ships being held up on one side of the Cape because of poor weather. Uh, I, I think there may be other issues at play here. I think the advent of internet connections for mariners, Starlink is a big one that's going on. I think that they're not getting shot at is another one. I also think that the post-COVID is finally starting to kick in here a little bit, but I do think that there needs to be more done to break this down. I just don't think it's being at sea longer is making people happier. Having been a sailor for a while, not exactly sure that a couple of more days at sea makes everybody happier. I think if you're getting paid better, if you're getting relief better, if your food is better, if your internet's better, you're going to be happier. I hope you enjoyed today's video. What we looked at was 5 big stories across. We looked at global maritime choke points, looked at the issue of Russian oil. We did some updates on some key stories that we have been talking about. Talked about the inland waterways of the United States, and we talked about global happiness for mariners out there. All of those play a decisive role in the economy of the world. I think it's really important we look at all of them and understand that low water on the Mississippi, low water in the Panama Canal, actions at the global maritime choke points, the issues with Russia and what they're doing on the global maritime environment with their sanctions, the attacks on the Black Sea. All the issues we're seeing here are absolutely vital to understand so that you have a better understanding of what it means when goods are moving around the planet, because you as the consumer, you as the shipper, you as the carrier, all of that comes back to you in your pocket. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell to be alerted about new videos as they come out. Leave a comment, share it across social media, and if you can, support the page. How do you do that? Well, you hit that super thanks button down below, or head on over to Patreon and become a monthly or yearly subscriber. Until the next video, Sal, signing off.